Here, conceptually, the library sitting there as part of the interpreter, the corrections that the evaluator would have done.
Gotcha!
Drink 5-Hour Energy. It's not a drink, more like a drink.
Whoa! Hey, G, did you bring the mail in yet? No. I've been saving that to calm myself, lest I get too giddy from rubbing my cock. You know, you really need a woman, G. What's a woman? What's a woman? What's a woman?
Drink 5-Hour Energy. Drink 5-Hour Energy. Drink. 5-Hour
I figured it out, Will. I'm gonna get Dad what he always wanted.
What, a Pizza Hut in the garage?
Better. I'm gonna clinch the election by getting an influential person to endorse it. Watch and learn. Hello, is President Bush there?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well.
Look at those funny little markings underneath the pictures. We call them words.
Very well.
Is President Bush there?
I can't hear you. I'll see you later.
Hey, G, would you make me a sandwich?
No.
Now this is a story all about how my license plate got flipped, turned upside down, and I'd like to take a bit on a couple of guys and my mom. My mom got scared and said, I whistled for a cab, and when it came near, the license plate said, Wisconsin! Made a dice in the mirror. If anything, I could say.
Would a man living in Los Angeles understand what a seagull is? Do we know about the ants there in the grass? Would the ants in the grass understand what the man's Volvo is? Do they know you can buy Pepsi in aluminum or glass?
For this commercial, the look, the style, and the music is everything. Lighting should be dramatic, but not shadowy. Location should be beautiful, but not weird. Clothing should be contemporary, but not punk. Casting should be characterizations, but not to the point of hoodlums. In other words, we can go out of the ordinary, but we can't live there.
Would advertising executive understand where the homeless live? Do we know about the bubbles in his glass? Would the bubbles in his glass understand what the man's golf cart is? Do we know you can die frozen underneath an overpass?
Every object, prop, and piece of clothing should complement each other. The photographic approach should be fresh, alive, and inspiring. Contemporary is a good word here. Like the 501 Jean ads, like the Levi Cord Night ads, like the Honda scooter ads.
Heightened reality vignettes.
When we're back to back,
Heightened reality vignettes.
Heightened reality vignettes.
see you.
Heightened.
When we're face to face, I'm
Heightened reality vignettes that all exist in the examples I've just described.
Would a man living in Los Angeles understand what a seagull is? Would he know about the ants there in the grass?
These Pepsi ads
Would the ants in the grass understand what the man's Volvo is?
These Pepsi ads should not look too urban, too ethnic, too new wave, or too anything. I know this may sound confusing, but I think it's better to know now than to argue on the set about it later. Good luck, everyone.
Would a man living in Los Angeles?
Good luck, everyone.
Would a man living in Los Angeles?
Good luck, everyone.
Would a man living in Los Angeles?
Good luck,
Los Angeles.
everyone.
Los Ángeles, queremos que conozcan el gran sabor de Diet Pepsi.
They say I'm crazy, I really don't care. That's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, about a brother trying hard to make it right. Not long ago, before I win this fight, say, everybody's talking all this stuff about me. Why don't they just let me live? Tell me why. I don't need permission, make my own decisions. Oh, that's my prerogative. It's my prerogative. It's the way that I wanna live. It's my prerogative. I can do just what I feel. It's my prerogative. No one can tell me what to do. It's my prerogative. 'Cause what I'm doing for you now. Don't get me wrong, I'm really not suited. Ego trips is not my thing. All these strange relationships really gets me down. I see nothing wrong with spreading myself around. Everybody's talking all this stuff about me. Yeah. Why don't they just let me live? Tell me why. I don't need permission. I don't need my own decision. That's my prerogative. It's my prerogative. I can do what I wanna do. It's my prerogative. Can live my life. It's my prerogative. I'm doing it just for you. It's my prerogative. Tell me why can't I live my life without all of the things that people say? Yo, Teddy, kick it like this. Out now. I can do what I wanna do. Me and you. Together. Everybody's talking. About me. Why don't they just let me live? Now. I don't need permission. I don't need my own decision. That's my prerogative. What is this, a blizzard that I can't have money in my pocket and people not talk about me? This world is a trick. I don't know what's going on these days. Got this person over here talking about me, this person. Hey, listen, let me tell you something. This is my prerogative. I can do what I want to do. I made this money, you didn't. Right, Ted? We out of here. It's mine. It's mine. It's mine. It's mine. It's mine. It's my prerogative. It's my prerogative. It's my prerogative. Can't you see, baby doll? Ha!
Drawing your own mandala designs requires no artistic background. I tell my students if you can print your name and the alphabet, you can draw a mandala. We use same lines and shapes, vertical, horizontal, curved, diagonal, whether we draw a mandala freehand or within a grid. Here I have taken same square paper and grid as before. In our last lesson we used fine liner to draw patterns on colored mandala. In this lesson we will be doing opposite of that, drawing patterns first and coloring them later. For our last mandala I am using yellow, orange, red and different shades of it. You can experiment with different colors if you like. Let's start drawing. Fill the innermost layer with plain light yellow color, as there is not much space left to draw patterns in it. For next layer, leave structure, but instead of plain lines, use spiral lines. And fill it alternatively with yellow color. You can experiment by filling the grids with spirals, patterns, swirls, dots, and so on, but make sure you start something simple and then later you can get into complex designs. The mandala that looks complicated is often constructed using very simple and basic shapes. Therefore, go ahead and keep trying. Specific coloring tool for your mandala. Gel pens, colored pencils, watercolor brush pen, and markers can all be used for coloring. But because most mandala designs are very detailed and intricate, many artists use gel pens and colored pencil since they have very fine points. Different brands of markers will behave differently, so try to use different types of markers that are out there and the different types of nibs or tips that they have. Different tips are good for different styles and techniques. Get a scratch piece of paper and try coloring in some squares to get a feel for how the different nibs work. For example, fine point, good for close lines and details. Brush tip, good for spreading ink smoothly in manner similar to watercolor. Flexible like brush, softer lines. Broad tip, good for large area coverage. Drawing a mandala is not rocket science at all. All you need to do is keep drawing. Start with something small and keep progressing as you master the skill. You will be amazed at your own progress as you keep working on your skill. Experiment with different styles, types of mandalas. Don't restrict yourself to just the repetitive drawing of mandalas. Here all our mandala drawings are ready. Congratulations on completing the whole course.
few months away, and all this practice that you get in now and all these preliminary meets will determine whether or not you make the Olympic team. America depends on these muscles for victory at the 1932 Olympiad. Get on your mark. Get set, go! This practice that you get in now and all these preliminary meets will determine whether or not you make the Olympic team. America depends on these muscles for victory at the 1932 Olympiad. Get on your mark. Get set, go! Maybelle Reichard, last year's national champion in discus and member of the 1928 Olympic team. Lillian Copeland, national champion in discus and javelin and member of the 1928 Olympic team. Alice Ryden, one of the country's best prospects for 1932 in the javelin event.
Tokyo Drink. Takara Kan Chuhai.
VO アメリカンで今日もアジアの夜は更ける。サントリーブランデー VO1000 円で新発売。
劇場で見ようスター・ウォーズ大会第2部第3部が日本で初めて一挙同時上映スター・ウォーズ春休みロードショー
水平解像度500本の鮮明画像を実現 AV& ニューメディアテレビナショナルアルファ 2000X2930 はナショナル特選品フェア
ついに発明泡の出る缶ビール本当にそうか調べてみようサントリー生ビール泡缶新発売
ファミリーコンピュータのスポーツコレクションスタジアムの熱狂そのままにベースボール多彩なテクニックで楽しむテニス
ジンギスカンジンギスカンどんどん食べればジンギスカンあそりゃ大の国やった
徹底的に西野味付けラム
でもコンタクトレンズをつけたままピッピッピッマイティ RCL だけなのよコンタクトレンズ専用です
これがリッチな缶ビール
サントリー缶ビール新発売
生き残るトラックはこいつだいすゞ走れフォワード
その時エンジンの音を忘れていたクオリティバランスシグマ
ソニーのウォークマンはとにかく薄いんです
参りました
じゃあこんなとこに入るのも
本当に参りました
着替える6色ウォークマン
It's a Sony
男の誇りが駆け抜ける。咲いてる男のコスモに新たなる喝采。街がパッと華やぐ。コスモにジェンティールシリーズ登場。
ピュッピュッピュッピュッ。小さいから私のそば。 CD コンパクトプレイヤー。
It's a Sony。 美味しいビールには美味しいおつまみ。アサヒビールファミリー缶、注ぎそそられ新発売。
今度は世界を救えるか。シリーズ最高のスケールで描く最新第14弾007美しき獲物たち。
ママも上手だね。
8ミリビデオに大興奮。
富士フイルムから新登場 Fujix8。
お一つ夢をどうぞ。
あいつといるとウイスキーがうまいと言われるやつになりたいな。ウイスキーウィー新登場。ウィーグラスついてます。
ホワイト&ソーダ。変わらない分だけ新しいサントリーウイスキーホワイト。
Herbie Highball.
I'm always in the vanguard. I'm always after the best in my music, such as Van. It's a miracle.
焼酎クライマックスバン。30年前の世界にタイムスリップした少年は若き日の両親と出会うことに。果たして彼は。スティーブン・スピルバーグ Back to the Future。
札幌ワインクーラーになりました。札幌ワインクーラー新発売。
この夏コダックを使っている人はいい色。そうじゃない人は頑張ってください。いい色。イエーイ。イエーイだぞ。コダカラー VR フィルム。いい色だから丸。
今度の味は何？ロッテシェイキリ、ブルーベリーの爽やかさ、タムタムミント、パパイヤの香り、パウパウパパイヤ。ロッテリアはリルエクサー。ハートフルロッテリア。
エキサイティングイベント女子プロレス。華麗なテクニック、強靭なパワー、そして目にも止まらぬ技がリングに咲く。月曜夜7時、四角いジャングルが修羅場と化す。
冷たい貼り薬ハリックス55は。いい気持ち。
貼り薬。
アイックス55。
お坊ちゃま、中華雑炊のお時間ですよ。
卵を入れる5分で美味しいクノール中華雑炊。
はいはいはいはい。
かっこよく生きる毎日。
ただいま第2課でウイスキーの小物など差し上げております。今一つ。
ゴルフ、麻雀、カラオケ、テニス、綺麗な文章でスラスラ、手書きなんてフリフリ。
カシオワード
ゴッキュッパ。見たいその時すぐ見れる。帰りも嬉しいカシオのポケットテレビ1キュッパカラーもあります。
ほっとするね。軽さ爽やかキャスター&キャスタースペシャル。
産業証券へ来ませんか。
サーニスをご存知ですか？山陽のサーニス投資相談コーナーでは、株式をはじめとするさまざまなデータをコンピューターで直ちに取り出し、皆様の投資戦略のお手伝いをします。山陽証券は今情報バンクです。
お待ちしています。
変化を先取りする山陽証券。
鮮やか勝ちです。 TDK ビデオテープ My Musical Staff TDK。
俺はヒゲよソレナイ。
動く2枚刃に白いスムーサーをプラス。ジレットアクタスプラス新登場。
カメソリの3巻オーダー。ジレッ
ト。あなたの渇き癒します。グリコ高原の岩清水&レモン新発売。天狗さんもびっくり。キリンの形のマイキリン新発売。はいどうぞ。
今日もどこかで誰かが
写真をテレビしましょう。わー。富士カラーの店で写真をビデオフロッピーに録画。このテレビフォトプレイヤーにポン。鮮やかな。うちの人気者テレビでお写真。
フジックステレビフォトシステム新登場。
冷酷非常残虐最強の悪のヒーローがやってくる。アーノルド・シュワルツェネッガー主演ターミネーター。25日ロードショー。
アジアかヨーロッパか、王冠色の希望がここにうごめいておりました。この一杯夢の入り口、千年コーヒー AGF グランデージ。
Anchored in the sheltered waters of the Bikini Lagoon below is an array of almost every type of naval vessel used in the past war. A bombing crew was competitively chosen. Major Swancutt, the pilot. Major Wood, the bombardier. The B-29 Dave's Dream would carry them to the target. The bombing plane is nearing the target with its escort of photographic planes. There's the target. Bomb away. There it goes. The fourth atomic bomb has been successfully detonated. First you see a blinding flash. Then comes the hemispherically shaped cloud that expands rapidly just behind the initial pressure wave. After the smoke clears, the characteristic mushroom cloud begins to form and shoot skyward. There is the ball of fire, growing and rising above the clouds and smoke of the explosion. Although obscured during the first 2 seconds, the ball of fire is still visibly red hot. The maximum temperature reached at the center of this ball, shortly after detonation, exceeds even the temperature of the sun. In less than a minute, it has reached a point 1 mile above the Earth. Although a beautiful sight, this swirling, boiling mushroom cloud is certain death to any living thing which approaches too close to its edge. On Bikini Island, over 3 miles from the point of burst. On the water, you can see the shock wave coming toward the camera. Watch those palm trees in the foreground.
The heavy cruiser Pensacola was located about 450 yards from the epicenter. This ship sustained serious superstructure wreckage. Both stacks were a total wreck, and numerous other topside structures were badly damaged. The submarine skate was located about 300 yards from the epicenter. The light fixtures, periscopes, and superstructure were demolished, but the pressure hull and conning tower remained intact, and interior machinery was undamaged.
10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
These pictures of the ascending water column show the expanding cloud of spray at the base of the column moving outward and enveloping the ships in the target array. Great quantities of radioactive water from the column descended upon the decks of the nearby vessels, and ship hulls a mile away were drenched by the wall of foaming water. Photographic tower on Bikini shows the column composed of millions of tons of water rising at an initial rate exceeding the speed of sound. The water and spray from the explosion will fall for several minutes. Here again is an excellent photographic portrayal of the boiling, foaming wall of water engulfing the ships in the foreground. This highly lethal spray was intensely radioactive.
An advanced element of Joint Task Force 7 is surveying AEC's permanent test ground, Eniwetok Atoll. More than 4,500 miles west of the California coast, with test time only moments away, final time signals are called by Colonel Preuss. Split seconds separate us from the detonation.
was decided to have a fourth test called the booster shot, and was detonated on a 200-foot tower. Booster was then ready for detonation. Now for a look at the booster shot.
Today, whatever you are, whatever you do, wherever you may go, you are a part of atomic warfare. It involves you, personally, in laboratories and in the field, in little-known places and ways. Units of the defense establishment of the United States are learning to work with atomic weapons, learning to strike, learning defense against the effects of atomic weapons. Blast, heat, light, radiation. Military units work continuously with the laboratories of the Atomic Energy Commission and their new weapon ideas. The services devise handling equipment and techniques that are practical, and delivery methods that are deadly under any and all conditions of weather and warfare. 13 minutes from now, this airplane is going to drop an atomic bomb on your country. You will see it happen. Fall 1950. A fierce international war rips through a small country on the North Yellow Sea called Korea. Russia has successfully detonated an atomic bomb. Now the Alamogordo of the Ural Valley is a fact. Now more than ever before, the balance of international power rests with atomic energy, with weapons moving steadily from assembly line to stockpile, moving to hidden subterranean vaults, to be stored, ready and waiting. But stockpiling alone in this day and year is not enough. We need to develop and produce a greater number and variety, and possibly even more powerful atomic weapons. Weapons tailored for specialized uses and targets. The biography of every atomic cloud is essentially the same. The intense heat and violence of the fireball as it sears the sky causes the spectacular and colorful rust-like condition in the air around it. As the fireball cools, an enormous vacuum and afterwind is created, causing the desert floor to rise up into the cloud itself, to form the characteristic mushroom stem. The cooling also sets up a rapid condensation in the air around the fireball that sometimes produces layers of ice crystals, literally an ice cap. Knowledge gained on previous nuclear weapons tests has produced the theory that once the cloud has formed and stabilized in the sky, the vitally significant fission products in so-called unburned fission fragments don't distribute themselves evenly, but tend to collect in very large, invisible pockets, hot pockets, or cells inside the cloud. The particles that are suspended in these nebulous cells indicate many things that happen inside the bomb, as well as the efficiency of the fission reaction. So attempting to locate the cells and collect samples from them is a mission of the highest priority. We re-enter our display areas close to ground zero, once RadSafe okays us for the move up. Since the biggest value of the operation is for us to prove to ourselves that it can be done, and find any weak points in the training, psychiatrists are with us to study our reactions before, during, and after the experience. It's quite an experience, no matter where you are to watch it. This kind of experience is immensely valuable for any military man.
Participation in Cactus supplied low-yield coral soil data for comparison with results obtained in Nevada soil from shots of similar yield. COA provided high-yield data for comparison with the low-yield cactus data obtained in similar soil. Successful measurement of neutron flux and spectra were made for a number of ranges. In the structural effects studies on the B-52, sufficient data were collected to substantiate a correlation between measured and analytical responses. This will establish a workable and reliable side load computation procedure. Yucca, the first of the 3 high-altitude shots, was prepared and launched from the flight deck of the aircraft carrier USS Boxer. At 11:25 hours on 28 April, when the Yucca balloon was released, the USS Boxer was operating about 90 nautical miles northeast of Nan Island, Bikini Atoll, maintaining a deck wind velocity of near zero. 2.5 hours later, 1440 hours, at an approximate altitude of 85,000 feet, Yucca was detonated by radio command signal. Failure of the telemeter command transmitter to activate the canister instruments prior to burst time resulted in almost complete loss of data from the balloon dragline equipment. The aircraft-mounted instrumentation provided excellent data. The Teak and Orange missile shots were fired from Johnston Island, about 720 nautical miles southwest of Honolulu. Each device was sent aloft by an Army Redstone missile. Attached to each missile were 4 pods, released during the acceleration phase of the Redstone. 3 of the pods contained telemeter-equipped instrumentation for the nuclear program. The 4th pod, programmed to be closest to the detonation, was utilized primarily for studying the vulnerability of ICBM structural materials. The first of the 2 missile shots, Teak, was launched on 1 August. It was planned to detonate at 250,000 feet, approximately 6 miles south of Johnston Island. However, due to a programming failure, it burst directly over the island at the desired elevation. Orange was launched at 2330 hours from Johnston Island on 12 August. It was detonated at an altitude of 141,000 feet, approximately 26 miles south of the island. A brief island on 12 August.
casus for the move up. Since the biggest value of the operation is for us to prove to ourselves that it can be done and find any weak points in the training, psychiatrists are with us.
And a smaller number at Albuquerque's Pantex plant near Amarillo. This joint Department of Defense and Department of Energy effort will preserve and allow appropriate release of this valuable historic information.
Last time we took a look at an explicit control evaluator for Lisp, and that bridged the gap between all of these high-level languages like Lisp and the query language and all of that stuff, bridged the gap between that and a conventional register machine. And in fact, you can think of the explicit control evaluator either as, say, the code for a Lisp interpreter if you wanted to implement it in the assembly language of some conventional register transfer machine, or if you like, you can think of it as the microcode of some machine that's going to be specially designed to run Lisp. In either case, what we're doing is we're taking a machine that speaks some low-level language, and we're raising the machine to a high-level language like Lisp by writing an interpreter. So, for instance, here, conceptually, is a special purpose machine for computing factorials. Right? Takes in 5 and puts out 120. And what this special purpose machine is actually a Lisp interpreter that's configured itself to run factorials because you fed into it a description of the factorial machine. Right? So that's what an interpreter is. It configures itself to emulate a machine whose description you read in. Now, inside the Lisp interpreter, what's that? Well, that might be a general register language interpreter that configures itself to behave like a Lisp interpreter because you put in a whole bunch of instructions in register language. This is the explicit control evaluator. And then it also has some sort of library of primitive operators and Lisp operations and all sorts of things like that. That's the general strategy of interpretation. And the point is, what we're doing is we're writing an interpreter to raise the machine to the level of the programs that we want to write. Well, there's another strategy, a different one, which is compilation. Compilation's a little bit different. Here we might have produced a special purpose machine for computing factorials, starting with some sort of machine that speaks register language, except we're going to do a different strategy. We'll take our factorial program, we'll use that as the source code into a compiler. What the compiler will do is translate that factorial program into some register machine language. And this will now be not the explicit control evaluator for Lisp, this will be some register language for computing factorials. Right? So this is the translation of that. That will go into some sort of loader, which will combine this code with code selected from the library to do things like primitive multiplication. And then we'll produce a load module, which configures the register language machine to be a special purpose factorial machine. Right, so that's a different strategy. In interpretation, we're raising the machine to the level of our language, like Lisp. In compilation, we're taking our program and lowering it to the language that's spoken by the machine. Well, how do these two strategies compare? The compiler can produce code that will execute more efficiently. The essential reason for that is that if you think about the register operations that are running, right, the interpreter has to produce register operations which in principle are going to be general enough to execute any Lisp procedure, whereas the compiler only has to worry about producing a special bunch of register operations for doing the particular Lisp procedure that you've compiled. Or another way to say that is that the interpreter is a general purpose simulator that when you read in a Lisp procedure then can simulate the program described by that procedure. So the interpreter is worrying about making a general purpose simulator, whereas the compiler in effect is configuring the thing to be the machine that the interpreter would have been simulating. So the compiler can be faster. Okay. Okay, on the other hand, so the compiler can be faster. Okay. So the compiler can be faster. Okay, on the other hand, the interpreter is a nicer environment for debugging. And the reason for that is that we've got the source code actually there. We're interpreting it. That's what we're working with. And we also have the library around. See, the interpreter, the library sitting there as part of the interpreter. The compiler only pulls out from the library what it needs to run the program. So if you're in the middle of debugging, and you might like to write a little extra program to examine some runtime data structure or to produce some computation that you didn't think of when you wrote the program, the interpreter can do that perfectly well, whereas the compiler can't. So they're sort of dual advantages. The compiler will produce code that executes faster. The interpreter is a better environment for debugging. And most Lisp systems end up having both. End up being configured so you have an interpreter that you use when you're developing your code. Then you can speed it up by compiling. And very often you can arrange that compiled code and interpreted code can call each other. And we'll see how to do that. That's not hard. Okay. In fact, the way in the compiler we're going to make, the way we'll arrange for compiled code and interpreted code to call each other is that we'll have the compiler use exactly the same register conventions as the interpreter. All right, well, the idea of a compiler is very much like the idea of an interpreter or evaluator. It's the same thing. So the evaluator walks over the code and performs some register operations. Right, that's what we did yesterday. Well, the compiler essentially would like to walk over the code and produce the register operations that the evaluator would have done were it evaluating the thing. Right, and that gives us a model for how to implement a 0th order compiler. Right, a very bad compiler, but essentially a compiler. A model for doing that is you just take the evaluator, you run it over the code, but instead of executing the actual operations, you just save them away. And that's your compiled code. So let me give you an example of that. Right, suppose we're going to compile, suppose we want to compile the expression f of x. So let's assume that we've got f of x in the x register and something in the environment register. And now imagine starting up the evaluator. Well, it looks at the expression and it sees that it's an application that have to do with arranging the thing that can simulate that machine. So they're always going to hold expressions which, from the compiler's point of view, are just constants, so can be put right into the code. So you can forget about all the operations worrying about exp and unev and just use those constants. Similarly, again, if we go back and look here, there are things like assign to continue eval args. Now that has nothing to do with anything. That was just the evaluator keeping track of where it should go next, right, to evaluate the arguments in some application. But of course that's irrelevant to the compiler because the analysis phase will have already done that. Right, so this is completely irrelevant. So a lot of these assignments to continue have not to do where the running machine is supposed to continue and keeping track of its state. It has to do with where the evaluator analysis should continue, and those are completely irrelevant, so we can get rid of them. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, well, if we simply do that, make those kinds of optimizations, get rid of worrying about exp and unev, and get rid of these irrelevant register assignments to continue, then we can take this literal code, right, these sort of 19 instructions that the evaluator would have done, and then replace them. Let's look at the slide. Right, replace them by, we get rid of about half of them. Right, and again, this is just sort of filtering what the evaluator would have done by getting rid of the irrelevant stuff. And you see, for instance, here where the evaluator said assign val, look up variable value, fetch of x, here we have put in the constant f. Here we've put in the constant x. Okay. So there's a little better compiler. It's still pretty dumb. It's still doing a lot of dumb things. And again, if we go look at the slide again, look at the very beginning here. We see a save the environment, assign something to the val register, and restore the environment. Where'd that come from? That came from the evaluator back here saying, oh, I'm in the middle of evaluating an application. So I'm going to recursively call eval dispatch. So I'd better save the thing I'm going to need later, which is the environment. This was the result of recursively calling eval dispatch. It was evaluating the symbol f in that case. Then it came back from eval dispatch, restored the environment. But in fact, the actual thing it ended up doing in the evaluation is not going to hurt the environment at all. So there's no reason to be saving the environment and restoring the environment here. All right, similarly, here I'm saving the argument list. That's a piece of the argument evaluation loop, saving the argument list. And here you restore it, but the actual thing that you ended up doing didn't trash the argument list. So there was no reason to save it. All right, so another way to say that is that the evaluator has to be maximally pessimistic, because as far from its point of view, it's just going off to evaluate something. So it better save what it's going to need later. But once you've done the analysis, the compiler is in a position to say, well, what actually did I need to save? And doesn't need to be as careful as the evaluator, because it knows what it actually needs. Well, in any case, if we do that and eliminate all those redundant saves and restores, then we can get it down to this. And you see there are actually only three instructions that we actually need, down from the initial 11 or so, or the initial 20 or so in the original one. Okay, and that's just saying, of those register operations, which ones did we actually need? Okay. All right. Let me just sort of summarize that in another way, just to show you in a little better picture. Here's a picture of starting. This is looking at all the saves and restores. Right, so here's the expression f of x, and then this traces through, on the bottom here, the various places in the evaluator that were passed when the evaluation happened. And then here you see arrows. Arrow down means a register saved. So the first thing that happened is the environment got saved. And over here the environment got restored. And so they're all the pairs of stack operations. Now if you go ahead and say, well, let's remember that that unev, for instance, is a completely useless register. And if we use the constant structure of the code, well, we don't need to save unev. We don't need unev at all. And then depending on how we set up the discipline of calling other things that apply, we may or may not need to save continue. So that's the first step I did. And then we can look and see what's actually needed. See, we didn't really need to save and or cross evaluating f, because it wouldn't trash it. So if we take advantage of that, then see, the evaluation of f here doesn't really need to worry about hurting env. And similarly, the evaluation of x here, when the evaluator did that, it said, oh, I'd better preserve the function register around that, because I might need it later, and I better preserve the argument list. Right, whereas the compiler is now in a position to know, well, we didn't really need to do those saves and restores. So in fact, all of the stack operations done by the evaluator turned out to be unnecessary or overly pessimistic, and the compiler's in a position to know that. Okay. Well, that's the basic idea. Right? We take the evaluator, we eliminate the things that you don't need that in some sense have nothing to do with the compiler at all, just the evaluator. And then you see which stack operations are unnecessary. And that's the basic structure of the compiler that's described in the book. Let me just show you how that example's a little bit too simple to see how you actually save a lot. Let's look at a little bit more complicated expression. That f of g of x and 1. And I'm not going to go through all the code. There's a fair pile of it. I think there's something like 16 pairs of register saves and restores as the evaluator walks through that. Here's a diagram of them. Right, so you see what's going on. You start out by, the evaluator says, oh, I'm about to do an application. I'll preserve the environment. I'll restore it here. Then I'm about to do the first operand. Here it recursively goes to the evaluator. The evaluator says, oh, this is an application. I'll save the environment. Do the operator of that combination, restore it here. This restore matches that save, right, and so on. There's unev here, which turns out to be completely unnecessary. Continues getting bumped around here. The function register is getting saved across the first operand, across the operands. Right, all sorts of things are going on. But if you say, well, what of those really were the business of the compiler as opposed to the evaluator, you get rid of a whole bunch. And then on top of that, if you say things like the evaluation of f doesn't hurt the environment register, or simply looking up the symbol x, you don't have to protect the function register against that. Right, so you come down to just a couple of pairs here, and still you can do a little better. Look what's going on here with the environment register. The environment register comes along and says, oh, Here's a combination. This evaluator, by the way, doesn't know anything about G. So here it says, I better save the environment register because evaluating G might be some arbitrary piece of code that would trash it, and I'm going to need it later after this argument for doing the second argument. So that's why this one didn't go away, because the compiler made no assumptions about what G would do. On the other hand, if you look at what the second argument is, that's just looking up 1. That doesn't need this environment register. So there's no reason to save it. So in fact, you can get rid of that one too. And from this whole pile of register operations, if you simply do a little bit of reasoning like that, you get down to, I think, just 2 pairs of saves and restores. And those, in fact, could go away further if you knew something about G. Okay. All right, so again, the general idea is that the reason the compiler can be better is that the interpreter doesn't know what it's about to encounter. It has to be maximally pessimistic in saving things to protect itself. The compiler only has to deal with what actually had to be saved. And there are 2 reasons that something might not have to be saved. One is that what you're protecting it against, in fact, didn't trash the register, like it was just a variable lookup. And the other one is that the thing that you were saving it for might turn out not to actually need it. So those are the 2 basic pieces of knowledge that the compiler can take advantage of in making the code more efficient. Okay, let's break for questions.
You kept saying that the uneval register or unev register didn't need to be used at all. Does that mean that you could just have a 6-register machine, or is it in these particular examples it didn't need to be used?
For the compiler, you could generate code for the 6-register 5, right? Because there's X goes away also. Assuming, yeah, you can get rid of both exp and unev, because see, those are data structures of the evaluator. Those are all things that would be constants from the point of view of the compiler. The only thing is this particular compiler is set up so that interpreted code and compiled code can coexist. So the way to think about it is maybe you build a chip, which is the evaluator, and what the compiler might do is generate code for that chip. It just wouldn't use 2 of the registers.